What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the reveal of the number 8 team in my 2019 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the LA Rams. And this team, last year, one of the best in the NFL, the NFC champions, did take a little help from the refs in New Orleans, but regardless, obviously, one of the better teams in the entire NFL last year. That said, I think it's pretty fair to say that this team heading into next year, with some losses on the team and some other things that we need to hit on, have some reasons why they may regress a little bit next year, and that's why I rank them here at number 8. But it's not to say that this team can't reach that potential yet again. It's just that they have some losses here. We're going to have to talk about who they lost, who's potentially going to step up into those roles. Are the guys they have in place good enough to give them the production they need? And at the end of the day, can they get back into the Super Bowl and maybe even bring one home this time? So it's going to be a fun deep dive. If you enjoy, if you learn something, please do hit that like button. It's the easiest way to support my channel and share the video. Also subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss a deep dive upload as we get closer to the number 1 team. Also, if you want a way to support the channel, if you're shopping for tickets, do it on SeatGeek. You're going to get the best prices there anyway. Use promo code ThatFranchiseGuy and you'll save $20 on your first purchase. If you're new to the series, what we do here, we go through the roster, we rank each position, how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So while it is a video game, these are my own ratings, and it's a nice little graphic to use to show how I perceive each player. After that, we're going to go through the schedule, game by game, talk about my win total expectations, get into the Vegas over-under odds, playoff odds, division odds, all that good stuff. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video so you don't miss any of that. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the roster here, starting with the quarterback, Jared Goff, and the Rams coming in tied for 16th. Goff, a lot of the things we said about Kirk Cousins really apply to Jared Goff, and he proved a lot of things last year in terms of his arm talent and ability to use the entire field. Just like we said about Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff is probably one of the 20 best humans on earth at just throwing a football. Really does have a nice arm and can use the whole field. But when you talk about Jared Goff, you also have a lot of criticisms that normally pop up with your typical system quarterback, right? Doesn't have the elite pocket sense, the ability to manipulate the pocket and sense pressure and extend plays with his feet. Doesn't have the physical ability really to do that either. Also, his processor might lack a little bit to be desired. Isn't really creating a lot of offense that isn't drawn up and executed in front of him. And that's perfectly fine. We've seen players like this play at MVP caliber levels and win Super Bowls. Hell, Jared Goff even came very close to doing it last year, though you could argue his play in that Super Bowl and kind of how limited he was and lacking kind of a counterpunch within this scheme was a big reason they weren't able to score enough points to win that Super Bowl. But the big question here for me is, can this Rams team get a ring before they have to pay Jared Goff? Because, the Falcons are kind of the staple for this. When you have a quarterback that you do need to buy time for, you do need to make sure he has weapons around him on offense, and you do need to make sure he's got a solid defense to support that as well. When you have to pay that player, it becomes a lot harder to put that fully rounded roster around that quarterback if he's getting 15 to 20% of the cap. But the beauty is they still have Jared Goff on that rookie deal and have a very loaded roster here until they have to pay him. And even though last year may have been their quote-unquote all-in year, they still have a lot of talent left over here, even though they did have some losses. So let's go through the rest of this roster and talk about kind of who the rest of these guys that need to step up here are. Behind Jared Goff, it's Blake Bortles. He's finally in the position he should have been years and years ago as a backup quarterback in the NFL. If anything happened to Jared Goff, I'm not trusting Blake Bortles to all of a sudden be a competent-looking quarterback. So let's move on to the running back situation here, which is a very interesting conversation to have. So I ranked them 10th, and I get it. Todd Gurley, when he was healthy, top 3 running back in the league, one of the few true difference-making running backs in the league as a 3-down threat, receiver out of the backfield, explosive runner, all of that. And I agree, he was an MVP candidate in a legitimate way. But look, I'm not going to sit here and project him to be healthy. This wasn't an ACL injury. This wasn't a shoulder tear that is going to recover. This is arthritis in his knee, a knee that has had significant injuries in the past. There are multiple pieces of hard evidence to believe that Todd Gurley, frankly, you can't expect him to come back and be a top 10 running back. For one, when the first reports were coming out at the end of last season, you could tell the team was not using him. It was weird. People were like, wait, he's active. He's supposed to be healthy. Why isn't he on the field? Then they actually put him on the field, and he just did not have the same burst. Then the offseason hits. You say, okay, hopefully he's getting healthy. The reports are the complete opposite. The reports are the team's worried about his knee, that he might not ever be a feature back for this team again. Yeah, it's just rumors, but then they go out, they re-sign Malcolm Brown, they draft Darrell Henderson in the 3rd round. This team is telling you that they don't feel confident in Todd Gurley. And even if he is going to be a factor on this team, I think in the regular season, they're really going to shy away from using him. If they think that knee has degenerative issues going on, why are they going to use, 200 and 250 carries a season on him, keep him healthy for the playoffs at least? So I do rank them 10th because I do project that Todd Gurley has some bit of a role here. But to me, the guy I look at here is Darrell Henderson, who to me was the best running back in this class before Josh Jacobs kind of emerged late in the draft process. But I actually think Darrell Henderson has an amazing season this year. We saw what this system can do, not just for Todd Gurley, but CJ Anderson. Henderson is a true 3-down caliber back, can run inside and out the tackles. I've actually already placed bets on Darrell Henderson to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's a guy in all my Dynasty fantasy leagues I am trying to get. Malcolm Brown can play as well. They also have John Kelly. He was one of my favorite sleepers in that 2018 class. So I do think that even if and when Todd Gurley is not what he has been in the past, they are going to be able to get 85-90% of that production at running back, just like they did in a street free agent in CJ Anderson. And you wonder why I only give 2% of my power rankings to running backs? Well, this is the perfect example right there. The best running back in the NFL was replaced by a street free agent, and they got pretty much the same production. That said, Todd Gurley is a true difference-making running back, and if he is not in that MVP form as an elite game-changing player, it does lower the ceiling of this offense just a little bit, and that's certainly something you're going to point to for why this team might regress just a little bit. So that's enough time on the running back room. Let's move on and talk about this wide receiver room. It's a good group of wide receivers, very good actually, tied for 9th. So you got Brandon Cooks there, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. Cooks, a couple years ago I would have said he's very overrated. I think people have kind of accepted what he is at this point. He's a very good deep threat, an elite athlete in terms of vertical speed. Does kind of lack I think it's just instincts with the ball in his hands. Like, you really don't see him make a lot of guys miss or create plays once he gets the ball in his hand. But he's a perfect scheme fit here. They run a ton of play action, deep crossers. If the quarterback gets 4 or 5 seconds to let a play develop, Brandon Cooks is one of the hardest covers in the league just running, a deep crosser. So he's a perfect scheme fit and a great asset for this team. Robert Woods, really the true number 1 here. He's the most versatile. This team caught some flack when they gave him a big contract out of Buffalo. Well, that was just good scouting on their end because he really has emerged as, at worst, like one of the best number 2 wide receivers in the NFL. But after what he did last year, you might consider him getting closer to being considered a true number 1 wide receiver, even if it is a lower end number 1 wide receiver. But he is a fantastic player here. I say good scouting because he didn't really do much in Buffalo, but clearly was just waiting to be untapped with better talent around him. Then you have Cooper Kupp. This team actually really struggled once he went down. This team runs a ton of 11 personnel. That's almost what this entire offense is predicated on. So all 3 of these guys are starters here. And Cooper Kupp's physicality in the slot was definitely missed when they went to Josh Reynolds after the injury. And I do think getting Cooper Kupp back here healthy is going to help this offense look closer to what it did really in the first 2/3 of last season, as opposed to the last third, where the offense was not quite as explosive without Todd Gurley and without Cooper Kupp. Again, I don't project Todd Gurley to be back, but you do at least get some of that back with Cooper Kupp and this really unique trio of really good starting wide receivers. Josh Reynolds can play, and now he comes in as nice depth, a third-year player who is now very familiar with this scheme. He can really play any of these positions if you get an injury, so he's nice depth, but it's nice that he doesn't have to be the starter. Then you got JoJo Natson, Kadero Hodge, Austin Proehl, Mike Thomas, like nothing really after that you get too excited about. At tight end, I really think Gerald Everett can play. Really good athlete. He really just passes the eye test, but he does split a lot of time with Tyler Higbee. And if it weren't for that time split that I expect to continue, and there really being 3 other really good receiving options here, I would actually peg Gerald Everett as a breakout candidate. I don't know if he's ever going to, be a high production guy, but I do think he's a really good mismatch problem and a nice weapon for this team. And he's not a terrible blocker. And it's not that Higbee's a bad player either. And that's why they put him on the field. He's a great blocker. He's a good enough athlete to create some separation as a tight end. So I actually like both of those tight ends. Neither are amazing, but they're both, quality starters, I would say. So you really have 5 quality starters amidst these receivers. And if this offense is going to resume as an explosive passing game, you do point to these receivers and what they're able to do. I would also keep an eye on Keenan Braun. They don't have a whole lot of tight end depth here, but an undrafted free agent out of Texas State. He's 6'2", but he's very athletic, great with the ball in his hands, can really block as like a slot wide receiver. So I actually see him making this team, and maybe not playing because they already have 2 good tight ends ahead of him, but do keep an eye on Keenan Braun out of Texas State. So tied for 9th for the wide receivers. Then you get to the offensive line, and we talked about Todd Gurley being a reason for regression here. We talked about maybe Jared Goff having more weight on his shoulders might be a bit of a sign for regression here, but this offensive line, again, is another reason this offense might not be quite as good as it was last year. But again, that's still a very good offense, even if you're at 85% of what this team was last year. So they do come in 17th. A lot of that is thanks to this tackle duo. You've got Andrew Whitworth and Rob Havenstein. So Whitworth, a total stud at left tackle. Again, last year was one of the best tackles in the entire NFL. But he's getting up there. He's like 36, 37 years old now. Like, you're definitely playing with fire. I'm not going to project that he has age regression or that he gets injured. But, that is around the age where things can really fall off a cliff in a hurry. And if that happened, that would be really detrimental to this team. But you do like what you have in Rob Havenstein as well. He's developed really nicely out of Wisconsin. He's turned into one of the better right tackles in the entire NFL. We knew he could probably be a good run blocker coming out of Wisconsin, but has really developed as a pass blocker. But then I look at the interior, and I got some really big questions. I mean, Austin Blythe, all of a sudden, is going to go from an undrafted guy who snuck onto the starting lineup here and was really surrounded by a lot of talent here and kind of had a breakout year and looked really good. But now all of a sudden he's your 3rd best lineman, and can he be as good as he was without the help of John Sullivan next to him or Roger Saffold at left guard? Because both of those guys are gone. And now you have really just rookies and second-year players competing at left guard and at center. So center's probably going to be Brian Allen, a 4th-round pick. I'll always give, multi-year starters out of the Big Ten at center some benefit of the doubt, but he is certainly no guarantee to be a quality center like John Sullivan's been here. Granted, Sullivan did take a step back last year, definitely was showing his age, but it's still a rookie center who's going to be responsible for calling out protections and all of that stuff. Obviously something John Sullivan brought something pretty unique to the table as a 10-year veteran and a former Pro Bowl type of player. And then at left guard, it's going to be a competition between a pair of 3rd-round picks. Joseph Noteboom, a 3rd-round pick last year. Bobby Evans, a 3rd-round pick this year out of Oklahoma. Both those guys certainly could turn into starting caliber players, but again, it is no guarantee. So I'm not saying this is a bad offensive line. And this offensive scheme does a really good job of, almost making it easier on this team because the way they use play action, they move this pocket a ton. It does not look very traditional. All of these guys are pretty good athletes that fit that scheme very well. So you definitely give them some benefit of the doubt for all of that. But this was an offensive line that has helped this team really do what they want to do the last few years. There's a lot of question marks for if this offensive line is going to be able to do that again after losing 2 starters and a left tackle that is incredibly aged. So the offense as a whole comes in 8th. Obviously still going to be an incredibly explosive offense. You have potentially the best play caller in the NFL, Sean McVay, probably behind Andy Reid there. But as far as the offensive coaching culture, we do rank this 2nd. So I do give this team the benefit of the doubt with a lot of this stuff with the young elite head coach there. But you do have a lot of moving pieces here. You got a lot of questions. You don't necessarily have an elite difference-making offensive player anymore like you had in Todd Gurley for a while there. And we did see a lesser version of this offense without that explosive Todd Gurley. Now, they could certainly get back to that. I could just be wrong about Todd Gurley. And to be honest, I hope I am, for Todd Gurley's sake. But I really do think you're going to be putting a little more pressure on Jared Goff here at times with a potentially worse line and running game as a whole. And I don't know if that's a winning formula to put more pressure on Jared Goff. So let's transition over to the defensive side of the ball. And they, to me, are going to come just short of a top 10 defense. And just like we had on the offensive side, they are going to have some moving pieces here on the defense to talk about. So we'll run through the run defense here. They come in 20th. Again, the difference between the 4th best run defense and the 25th, it's really not much of a difference at all. You have Aaron Donald here. Michael Brocker's a good run-stuffing interior guy. Greg Gaines, a 4th-round pick here. This is why, for the New York Giants, you don't draft Dexter Lawrence in the 1st round. Like, Greg Gaines is 85% the nose tackle that Dexter Lawrence is. He's going to be a really good run defender in this league. Take him off the field in 3rd down. Let some of these quicker guys get after the quarterback, and you're all good to go. You got Tanzel Smart, John Franklin Myers, maybe a guy that would kind of split reps there with Greg Gaines as more of a pass rusher. Morgan Fox. The linebacker situation here might be somewhat of a liability in terms of stopping the run, but, again, we don't really put a lot of weight in run defense. If this team decides with Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers to load the box a little more and stop the run, they'll be able to do it, just like pretty much every other team in the NFL. So let's not hang on the run defense here. Let's move on and talk about the pass rush. It's going to come in tied for 11th for me. And, I really don't need to say much about Aaron Donald here. Like, he's the best pass rusher in the NFL, arguably the best pass rusher in NFL history already, just by eye test, not accolades, obviously. He's still pretty young. But the fact that this team still ranks tied for 11th tells you everything you need to know about Aaron Donald, because on the edge, who's the best edge rusher here? Probably Dante Fowler. But, the fact that they come in here tied for 11th, tells you everything you need to know about Aaron Donald, because a big problem I have with this just pass rush in general is, you've got Aaron Donald who's going to demand a double, even triple teams at times. But when you have a guy like that, wouldn't you want to have a guy that you can say, okay, Donald's going to attract all that attention. Thank God we have this guy that can, just destroy a guy one-on-one pretty consistently. And that's not, that doesn't have to be a Khalil Mack or a DeMarcus Lawrence, but couldn't it be like, Preston Smith, Carl Lawson, like somewhere in that tier? Like, they don't have a guy that you point to and say, okay, we're going to get this guy in a one-on-one situation and he's going to consistently beat his man. Dante Fowler's not that guy, and he never will be. Just doesn't have the skill set. He's a fantastic athlete. As a 3rd or a 4th edge rusher, he's pretty good. He can be a good cleanup artist and kind of scream off the edge, but you're not consistently relying on him. You've got Clay Matthews, who, might even play inside linebacker here. He's pretty washed up at this point. I think Green Bay is actually pretty excited to no longer have him. You've got Samson Ebukam. He's a good young player and just an insane athlete, but as a pass rusher, I don't really rely on him. He's fine, but, what he really brings to the table to me is scheme versatility, run defense, coverage ability. As an edge rusher, he's a nice player. Then you've got just a bunch of young guys, Justin Lawler, Trayvon Young, Josh Caraway, Agbanya Okoronkwo. Like, it's just, to be honest, if this team didn't have Aaron Donald, it probably would be the worst pass rush in the NFL, and I don't even know if it would be that close. Even on the interior, like Michael Brockers isn't much of a pass rusher. I do like John Franklin Myers, and he might actually even take a step up here with Ndamukong Suh gone, and maybe he's this team's best, or second best pass rusher here. But man, I do have some worries about this pass rush in certain matchups. Like, when this team plays the Patriots, like we even saw this a little bit in the Super Bowl, or some of these other teams with really good interior defensive lines. If doubling Aaron Donald's enough, you're going to be able to get one-on-one matchups with the rest of these guys, and I don't know who else is really going to consistently win. So, obviously you have Aaron Donald. It's going to be a pretty good pass rush, but I think tied for 11th is about the ceiling right now, because I don't know who else is really going to step up and improve this thing to be any sort of elite pass rush. Then you talk about the linebackers here, and you do have to note that John Johnson, who we'll talk about in the secondary, does play a lot in the box and does help this team from a coverage standpoint in the box. We kind of mentioned how these linebackers are a little bit of a liability from a run defense point of view. But I do like Cory Littleton. He's a developing young player, a good 3-down upside linebacker type. I do like him, but he's right now just a slightly above average starter, I would say. And then you got a pretty big drop off after him. You got a couple young players, Micah Kaiser, Dakota Allen, smart, instinctive guys, but not the best athletes. You have Bryce Hager, whatever. Does Clay Matthews play inside linebacker? Like, it's just not a very good group of inside linebackers. They're able to disguise some of it when they bring John Johnson into the box and have a good second-level defender there in him. And Cory Littleton did show some nice things last year, but it's not really a strength of this team. We ranked them 28th. I don't know if you would call it a weakness because of the way they disguise it, but really not too much intimidation there in the second level of the defense. And then the secondary here, very good. This is probably the most steady part of this defense outside of Aaron Donald. So you got Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib, good corner duo. Marcus Peters kind of showed his true colors a little bit last year. He's in the 20 to 30 best corners in the NFL. He's basically just remarkably aggressive. Not very tactically sound at all. But you could actually make an argument that I don't necessarily care if you hold too much or get beat a couple times if you're able to make a crazy break on a ball or punch a ball out and force a big interception. Especially when your offense is really good, it's really nice to have those playmakers that can create turnovers. Probably best suited as your number 2 corner. Can Aqib Talib be the number 1 here? He's getting older. He's dealt with a ton of injuries. If he can stay healthy, that's great, and they might even exceed this tied for 9th ranking if he can play at a high level and prove that he can stay healthy, but you probably aren't counting on that. You do have some decent depth. You've got Troy Hill, who can play at a replacement level starter level. And then you also have David Long, a 3rd-round pick who I really liked out of Michigan. Might project best in the nickel, but he could step outside and play there as well if needed. So I love the depth at corner. Not a whole lot after that that you'd be talking about. And then you got nickel Roby Coleman playing in that nickel corner position. One of the best nickel corners in the entire NFL. Hell, his name is even fitted to play this position. So you really do like what you have there to shut down some of those short to intermediate passes in the nickel. And then the safety duo is pretty solid as well. Definitely leads to this tied for 9th ranking. So you bring in Eric Weddle to replace LaMarcus Joyner. Not going to bring the same range that you had in LaMarcus Joyner, and that is a bit of a drop-off from last season, in my opinion. But Weddle, a very nice player in his own right, did show some regression last year for the Ravens, but still a pretty solid player. He's going to be what I view as just a starting caliber player, and is going to offer a veteran presence here. Not really going to, move the needle a ton, though, but was a good signing to kind of get a steady player that you know what you're getting. We mentioned John Johnson. He's the box safety here. He will play some free safety as well, but mostly going to exist in the box. He's one of the better box safeties in the NFL. I actually just made my list of the most underrated player on this entire team. I think his ability to cover in the second level does hide a lot of the warts that this team has at that linebacker position. So I like the safety duo. They draft Taylor Rapp in the 2nd round. Really good player. Was definitely drafted off of his film because his workout scores were really poor. He ran in the 4.7s. There's not a great track record of players that unathletic working out as a safety. Really the best example I can think of is Tony Jefferson for the Ravens. but he plays mostly in the box because, being a rangy coverage defender, not his strong suit. So does Taylor Rapp kind of fall into that category? Can he overcome the poor 40 time and, play a lot faster than that workout score and be more of a free safety, a versatile safety like he was in college? I think he's just a really steady player and could be a starting caliber strong safety and maybe the long-term replacement for a John Johnson, who this team might not be able to afford after they pay Jared Goff. That's just kind of how I view Taylor Rapp. But he's a really smart, instinctive player and is going to be really good depth here. I don't know how much he plays in his rookie year, though. Then you have Travin Howard, a 7th-round pick last year, Nick Scott, a 7th-round pick this year, Marquis Christian, and that rounds out this secondary that comes in tied for 9th. So the defense is just very solid. This is still an offensive-minded team with a lot of their resources invested on that offensive side of the ball, the coach there on the offensive side. But, you definitely credit Wade Phillips with this defense. Comes in 9th in terms of defensive coaching and culture. It's not going to be, a championship defense. If this team does win a Super Bowl, it's going to be a combination of good defense and good offense. I do have some questions about, if Aqib Talib is injured and Aaron Donald is being handled, doesn't take a whole lot for this defense to all of a sudden be a pretty sloppy, passive team to particularly pass the ball against, because the pass rush outside Aaron Donald is not going to exist really, and you don't really have any superstars in the secondary. But for the most part, this should be a pretty solid defense. Again, we rank them 14th. So what does all this mean? I keep saying they're going to be worse than last year, but they were so good last year. How much worse are we talking here? Are they going to make the playoffs? Can they make a Super Bowl run? What are we talking about here? Well, I obviously still see this as a very good team. I rank them as the best team in arguably the best division in football in the NFC West. But as I look at this schedule here, I currently do not have the Rams making the playoffs this year. Kind of similar to what we said about the Seattle Seahawks, a very good team, but getting their hardest non-conference games this year on the road is a really bad draw for this Rams team that has already kind of had a bad offseason here. You got to go to Carolina to open the season. Home opener is never easy. That's a good Panthers team. At Cleveland, going to be a ton of buzz for that game. You got to go to Atlanta, go to Pittsburgh, go to Dallas. It's exactly what we said with Seattle. If you're going to play in a competitive division and a competitive conference, you want to get Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay, Baltimore in Baltimore, Cincinnati in Cincinnati, because you're a good enough team to go on the road and beat those teams. But if you're going to draw all these tough road games, it is going to make things a lot harder. Now, I do have them a win range of 8 to 11. They do have the upside to go into San Francisco and win, to go into Dallas and win, go into Cleveland, Carolina, Pittsburgh and win. But I really don't think those are games that I would say they're favored to win by any means. So I have them going under. They're very high, over under 10.5 points. And I actually feel pretty confident in this. This is my favorite under bet on the entire season. One of my best bets that I would tell people to make, and I gotta remind people to gamble responsibly because YouTube is cracking down on that now legal act. But at plus 275, that's almost 3-1 to bet that this team does not make the playoffs. I have actually already made this bet myself. I just think a lot's really gone wrong here in this offseason. You don't really have the quarterback that can take that extra weight. You've got a rough schedule, and hell, you probably, if Kyler Murray's as good as I project, have the worst quarterback in the division, which is never a good formula to be the favorite in your own division. And then a plus 750 to win the Super Bowl, that's way too high. I'm surprised people are actually taking that bet. So I'm not trying to shred this team. It certainly could be a team that's really solid, but personally, I don't really see the upside. I think the offense will still be really good, but I don't think it'll be as good as it was last year. And hell, it was not as good as it was for the first 12 weeks of the season in the last 2 months of the season. And then the defense, I just don't think has enough stars to really be a top 10 championship caliber defense, even if you do have Aaron Donald there. So that's going to do it for my breakdown on the Rams. I'm sure Rams fans are not going to like a lot of the things I said. That's fine. You're allowed to disagree. Let me know in the comments what you think. Also, other NFL fans. What do you think? I know this is a popular team to kind of disappoint this year, so what do you think? Do you think this is too high or too low? Looking forward to hearing from you guys. Please do hit that like button. Cheers as always, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace.